Hello and welcome to Newsmakers on CHCH Podcast. I'm your host, Louie Butko, and on today's show, I'm very pleased to be joined by Ward 8 councillor here in Hamilton, John Paul Danko. Councillor Danko is now in his second term as councillor, representing the constituents in West Hamilton Mountain, having been first elected in 2018, a graduate of McMaster University with a degree in civil engineering, and is a licensed professional engineer with more than 20 years' experience in the private sector. At council, he currently sits on 4 standing committees, including as vice chair of Public Works. And away from council, he's also a commercial photographer and writer, and calls Ward 8 home with his wife Dawn, 2 children, and 3 cats. And I should mention, Dawn, you guys make up quite the power couple in Hamilton politics. What's a typical dinner conversation? Do you avoid politics as much as you can at home?
I mean, it definitely keeps us busy. It is something that we talk about quite a bit. You know, hey, what happened in your meeting? Oh, let me tell you what happened in my meeting. We usually try not to have those conversations at the dinner table. That usually ends up in the hot tub with a bottle of wine.
Because I can think like there's a lot of things that both you would go through that's similar. Like you said, the nuances of meetings, to turn it off like that, I can believe can be pretty tricky at times. But what is it about public life that was a draw to you? Like, I want to say, like, being a local councillor, it can sometimes be a thankless job, it seems. Why were you attracted to that?
It's quite a change from my previous career as a civil structural engineer working in heavy construction for 20 years. In a lot of ways, it is quite different. In some ways, some of those on-site conflicts are somewhat similar. But what really drew me to local politics and getting involved, it started with our local community school. And the school board was doing a review, and it was one of the places where they were looking at to close. And that really drew me in to get more involved in the community. And it just kind of went from there. There was an opportunity with a by-election. My wife really encouraged me to run. She said, you've always been interested in local politics, what's going on with Hamilton. And I think this would be something I know you want to do, so you should do it. This is the chance. That
by-election, Ward 7, you lost to a former reporter of ours here at CHCH. Not to bring up, I mean, it worked out for you.
But 98 votes.
I was just about to ask, what was that like? And was it more motivation to run again then for your seat in Ward 8? And I mean, losing's never fun. Like, how do you get over something like that?
It was definitely, it's a lot of work. I mean, anybody that runs any elected campaign, whether it's school board, council, MP, MPP, upper levels, there's a ton of work that goes into it, all the things that go in the background. And I don't think a lot of people really appreciate the amount of effort for how long it goes into a winning campaign. So in the by-election, I came in as an unknown. Nobody knew who I was. It was a really difficult experience, especially coming that close. And I was adamant, I am not running again. That's it. I'm done. And then again, an opportunity came up when Scott Duvall was elected federally. Again, so the incumbent councillor was gone. They rearranged the ward boundaries. And again, it was my wife that, again, encouraged me. She's like, I know you don't want to go through the campaign again, but again, you have this opportunity, and they don't come around very often. You got to take it.
For your constituents, what are the issues that you're hearing in email for Ward 8? What's front and center in your mind and your constituents' minds?
Well, there's definitely the nuts and bolts day-to-day of the constituency, things that people are concerned about. That's largely neighborhood-driven. So things like roadway safety, traffic safety is definitely, the last few years, been top of mind. There's seasonal things, infrastructure, the condition of the roads, that kind of thing. More and more recently, congestion, as we've been talking about off air just before we started. Just the routine getting to and from work and where you're coming and going. And then affordability. That has been a huge issue in the last few years, and it's just been accelerating. We talk a lot about housing affordability, but I think it's also just affordability in general. People are having a really hard time making ends meet, and the cost of everything is going up.
Well, we'll get into some budget discussions because you mentioned the word affordability. I want to get back to council because you were one of just a few returning councillors from last year, and even that you were serving your first term. With this new look, with a new mayor, with I think it's 10 out of this 15 seats on council that had changeover from the year before. What have you taken out of this last year? It was a year ago this week that there was an election. What have you taken from this first year of this new council?
It's been a very different council than it was last term. I've really enjoyed working with Mayor Horvath, with her office. The leadership that she brings to that position has been, a really good positive influence, in my opinion anyway, for the city of Hamilton. And working with a bunch of the new councillors that were elected, I think we have some really talented people there that are very motivated to do what they can in their role to help make Hamilton become a better place for families, for seniors, for everyone. So it's been really exciting in that way. There's been some growing pains for sure, as there always are. But I think in general, we just did our term of council priorities, and in most things, we're fairly aligned, which is really exciting.
Well, yeah, I remember being at the meeting a few weeks ago where the budget was first brought up. Councillor McMeekin introducing a motion to try and cap basically it at 4% before discussions had even began. And there was a lot of passion from both sides. And the one thing I kept hearing from some of the newer councillors I thought was interesting was, we've pushed this down the road. There's enough projects that we've pushed down the road far enough that it's coming due. Do you get the sense that there is an optimism around this council that they want to see some change, that the status quo for the last 10, 15 years is just not good enough for Hamilton?
I think there's definitely a lot of desire for change and to initiate new ways of doing things. And especially, that sort of feeling that it's been status quo for a long time and we want to do things differently and we want to do it now. We don't want to do reports. We don't want, report back, or we don't want to send it out to consultants. We just want to move forward with things. And I think, it's great to have that optimism, but there's also some realities of what we can actually do as a municipality and what can we realistically afford. And I think balancing those priorities is one of the biggest challenges that we have as a new council, and especially as we go into this difficult budget cycle.
All right, let's talk about the budget cycle. A staff report from last month said a 14% tax increase is possible. The first public delegation set for Monday, November 6th. I'm assuming the public will be very passionate come that meeting. What are you expecting come November 6th?
So I've definitely heard from constituents already that a 14% tax increase anywhere in that range is completely untenable. The mayor said that. I think most of council really understands that we really have to think about our taxpayers and how they are struggling to make ends meet and what any level of tax increase really means on the average tax bill. And it can be several $100s, in addition, and that can be the difference between somebody being able to make their mortgage payments and not. So it's not an arbitrary exercise. It's something that has a real impact on people. Now, a lot of the tax increase, to Councillor McMeekin's point about what we can control as a municipality, limiting that to 4%, we're actually not far off of that, for what we can actually control as a municipality. A lot of our budget drivers, especially this year, are downloading from the province and responsibilities that the province has sort of shifted onto municipalities that we have no choice but to take over. So an example would be housing and homelessness. In the 2020-23 budget, we budgeted $12 million for housing and homelessness supports. We ended up spending over $50 million. Wow. So that's unbudgeted. That are needs that we had no choice. You've got people living on the streets. You have to, spend the money that you need to in order to provide them with help. But those kinds of budget drivers are things that are, they're really healthcare, they're really mental health, and it's downloaded from the province.
Though the 5 I have here: affordable housing, climate change, transportation, employee relations, public health, and emergency response. Those are kind of the 5 key that you really don't have a choice. You have to spend. You mentioned the province. Can you talk about the effects of what the province's downloading has had on the city? Like what has changed in terms of what the province used to do that they're no longer doing?
Well, a big one is in Bill 23, which was finalized a couple years ago. But just in that one piece of legislation from the province, that's a 2.55% tax increase for Hamilton taxpayers in order to fund the development, the growth shortfalls that we would have otherwise collected from development charges. So just in that one bill, you're over 2.5% tax increase that's downloaded to City Hamilton taxpayers that would have otherwise been paid for by new growth and development. And then on top of that, there's other responsibilities where the province has kind of taken a step back. And because as a municipal government, there's nobody else left to fill in these spots. So another example was food banks and food share, where, the food banks are running out of food. We have no choice. We have to step in with emergency funding. Along with mental health and addiction supports, that we're spending tremendous amounts of money in order to try to get residents the help that they need. But that's healthcare, right? That is 100% a provincial responsibility, and it falls to city taxpayers.
And the other part of this, and it's always one of those things where you tell someone, the Canadian federal government's deficit is this, or the Ontario provincial government has a surplus of this. By law, municipalities have to have a balanced budget, no?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a challenge that comes with that.
So year to year, we cannot run a deficit. We cannot have debt. We can finance some capital works through debt financing, but the majority is if we overrun our budget, the only way that we can pay for that is to raise taxes. And, for Canadian households, I think everybody has seen their grocery bill go up, their mortgage rates go up, their interest rates. And it's the same for municipalities. I'd say even more so. In the last couple of years, just the cost of construction has gone up 30%. So just this week, there was the story of the HSR storage and maintenance facility going over budget by, I think it was about $80 million. Well, we got federal funding for that project. We have to move forward with it. All of our growth planning is based on expanding transit in order to accommodate growth. So that's one of those things where we have this huge increase that we have to fund. And unfortunately, that falls to mostly residential property taxes, which is how you should not be funding this kind of thing, right? You want to be funding big projects like that through means taxes, through income tax and through sales tax, which if you make more money, you're able to pay more. Whereas a property tax is the senior right now that can barely stay in their house is affected just as much as somebody that can afford it.
Well, the other big news at a council this week was what council decided to do, asking the RCMP to include the expansion of the urban boundaries that the government went ahead with and has since reversed. I know you ran on a campaign of fighting for the protection of the urban boundaries. What has this last few weeks between the Greenbelt reversal, between the urban boundary, and some people might argue, well, what does Hamilton have to say about this? Why even bother with this? Everything's been reversed. A, what has the last few weeks been with you with the Greenbelt and reversal and such? And B, why ask the RCMP to investigate?
Well, I think planning in the province of Ontario has been a real roller coaster ride for the last few years, to say the least. The amount of changes that have come through as chair of planning committee have been really unprecedented, and we've spent a lot of time with our staff just trying to manage those changes and implement the programs that the province is implementing. And I think the urban boundary in particular, and also the Greenbelt, are really important for Hamilton for two reasons. Number one, we have some of the best farmland in all of Canada, and this is farmland that once it's developed, once it's paved over, it's gone forever. So I think we have a real duty to future generations of Hamiltonians to protect that at all costs. And also is the financial impact on the city of Hamilton. for every house that we build that grows out of a cornfield, it costs taxpayers money to subsidize the growth, all the infrastructure, the fire station, police, rec centers, everything that goes along with it. Taxpayers are subsidizing that growth, whereas every new residential unit that we build within the city of Hamilton that's using existing infrastructure is net positive from a tax revenue perspective. So in the long term, we're really bankrupting ourselves by building greenfield sprawl. So to have that reversed by the provincial government, has been just a huge win for Hamilton taxpayers. And then, when you go through some of the Greenbelt stuff with the Auditor General's report, with the Integrity Commissioner report, it really raises some red flags of what really happened here, what discussions happened, and, how is this legal? And that extends to the same urban boundary discussion.
Even the reports we've seen in the last week, there was a Leuna executive that had some land in Grimsby. It really is interesting. It's not going away. But so where do we build? Where we need places for people to live. You're the chair of the planning committee. Where would you like to see development happen in the city?
Well, right now we're changing a lot of how we plan and where we're accommodating growth. So right now we have about 10 and a half years of available land for residential development within the former urban boundary. So with the current growth patterns, current density, current market-driven housing that we're building, we still have about 10 and a half years supply, before we even have to think about adding one single acre. At the same time, we've put in a lot of new policies for rezoning along major arterial roads, for making it easier for development on underutilized component areas of the city, and also rethinking about the downtown core and the LRT corridor as well is a major one. One of the main reasons why we fought so hard to have LRT was that residential uplift in growth along that entire corridor, and we're seeing some major developments coming forward for Eastgate Square, from some of those old retail plazas that are thousands and thousands of new residential units. But some of our challenge now is to make sure that those are actually family-friendly units, that they're environmentally friendly, and they're real communities for people that are going to want to stay and live and raise their families here.
Well, the one thing this month that I saw that you got pretty excited about was the proposed redevelopment of the Stelco lands. We got a look at the new plans and renderings. It's an 800-acre development. You wrote on Twitter here, redevelopment of the former Stelco lands are a generational opportunity to redefine employment in Hamilton. 23,000 new jobs, 12 million square feet of light industrial space, 3.8 billion in economic activity. Safe to say you're excited about the possibility that could come with this development.
Absolutely. Very excited about it. One of the reasons why I ran and became involved in local politics is because I had a young family, and I wanted to make sure that do what I could as an elected representative to make sure that Hamilton is the kind of place where people that, do have kids or, want to have those opportunities for their family to be able to stay in Hamilton, to work in Hamilton. And we have some amazing assets in our city. We have, McMaster, Redeemer, Mohawk College. So we're training the next generation, but they often have to leave Hamilton in order to find opportunities. We want to bring people here as a magnet employment center. We do a great job on healthcare and institutional, but really those are government funded, right? That's taxpayer money that's funding those jobs. It's a fantastic sector. It's our biggest employer. But the slate development is different because that is all private sector. And I think if you think about 23,000 new jobs in the city of Hamilton on those old steel industrial lands, that is more of an economic impact than steelmaking had at its peak, which thinking about what Hamilton looked like in the 60s and 70s, that's kind of what we're getting back towards, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, you mentioned people coming into Hamilton. That was the big storyline over the last few years. You know, you pick up a Toronto Sun, Toronto Star, they're always talking about people wanting to come in Hamilton. What is the sell? If I was had a young family looking for a place to live in the Golden Horseshoe, what's the sell on Hamilton?
I think one of the main things people are looking for is that Hamilton is a real city. You know, we have a real downtown core. We have all those issues that go along with real cities, but also the amenities, right? Like if you're raising a family, if you have kids, you want to make sure you have good schools. You want to make sure that that they are going to be able just to get part-time employment, that you can have your local grocery store, that kind of thing. One of the biggest challenges, and going back to some recent committee meetings, is housing affordability. So those young families that want to come to Hamilton because of the amenities that we offer as a city are really finding it hard because of housing prices. So we're finding I believe the statistics are that people move here when they're relatively young, but when they actually are looking for that family home where they're going to, raise their own kids, a lot of them are forced to leave Hamilton because just the cost of housing is so high.
I mean, you mentioned housing. There's no easy solution. If there was, we would have found it by now. What would you like to see? What would you, in terms of changes, to get more shovels in the ground, to get more housing complexes built, affordable housing built? What would your plan be?
Well, it's something that didn't happen overnight, right? Like we've had 20 years of record low interest rates where people, because the cost of borrowing was so low, they're over leveraging and then they're buying houses that they would otherwise not be able to afford, driving that cycle of increasing the cost of housing. We've also seen a dramatic increase in the commodification of housing. And the recent renoviction issues where large corporate housing investors are driving people out in order to drive up the rents. So that's a huge challenge. Some of the solutions, I think, again, it's going to take years before we get there, but we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to encourage the type of housing that we need for residents. So in particular, family-friendly units. We do have policy that's coming forward on family-friendly development, how to promote that, how to try to encourage developments to build that. So if you think about an apartment that was built in the 60s or 70s, usually very large 2-3 bedroom units, there was a pool, there was all those kinds of amenities. They're built for families to be able to be a full community versus a lot of the new development is very small bachelors and singles. And they're not very family friendly. They're based on investors, and it's not somewhere where if you've moved there, you really don't see it as somewhere where you're going to be able to stay with your kids. So that's one of the things, and also our senior population. When there's kind of two demographic peaks. There's the kind of 20 to 30-year-old peak, and then there's the senior peak. And we need to do better in order to provide seniors with places to live and stay in their own community if they want to downsize. So all of those single-family homes that you have, seniors that are staying in because they want to be in their own community, they don't want to move out because they really don't have any options, right? So they just stay put. So those are kind of the two things that we're working on.
Would you... carriage houses, second dwellings on properties. I mean, would you be in favor of all that just being pushed ahead, being allowed? Like, because I've noticed in other municipalities, they talk about, that carriage house or, a second dwelling on your property. Is that on the table? Is it a viable option?
Yeah, so we've already moved forward with detached secondary suites in your own property. It's something that we definitely want to promote. It's something that I think a lot of families can leverage. So again, the cost of borrowing being so high, interest rates going up, if you can't meet that mortgage payment in the full residence, then maybe an option is to rent out a portion of it for someone else.
I want to get back to the province here and the decisions they've made in the last few weeks, few months, even before that, in reverse, and taking away land from the Greenbelt in the first place. Does the city of Hamilton have a good relationship with the province?
I think we have a professional working relationship.
It's a very professional answer.
I think a lot of what you see in the newspaper, and kind of the headlines is not necessarily the reality of the bureaucracy behind the scenes. So you have the political side, which can be very heated at times. Then you also have where the actual work happens in the bureaucracy. And we have a professional workforce at the city of Hamilton that understands that they have to have a collaborative working relationship with the province, and I think vice versa. I know the mayor has a very good working relationship with her counterparts at the province. So, I don't think it's as adversarial as it might appear on the surface, but there are definitely some issues where we do not see eye to eye.
Something you've done in the last few weeks, you've introduced a motion that passed that does ban the city of Hamilton from advertising on Facebook and Meta. You said in this bill, the federal government, that referring to C-18, the federal government is defining local news as important to our democratic institutions. They've recognized the near collapse of the local news system because of tech platforms. Again, I go back to being a city councillor. Why was it important for you? City spends $33,000. That's a drop in the bucket when it comes to the city's budget. But why was it important for you to go to council to ask for this motion with Facebook and Meta?
Well, I think the Online News Act is a really important initiative by the federal government to really recognize how important it is to our democratic institutions to have an effective and accessible news network, whether that's print media or news TV. Most people still get their news from the 6 o'clock news. Like I often get emails and calls from people that are responding to what they saw on the 6 o'clock news. CHML, people still have that on 24/7, all day, every day. It's on as soon as they get up.
Except at 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock.
There you go.
6 a.m. We know what you meant.
Yeah. So, and we've seen this locally where the local reporting was really what was driving the provincial reactions to the Greenbelt, right? Like you can see the direct relationship there. That was the investigative reporting that costs a lot of money to do, had a direct impact on what ended up happening locally. We've seen Metroland, go bankrupt and shutting down. We've seen the Spectator close their newsrooms, and that has a direct impact on the type of information that local residents are able to access, and then they're falling back to TikTok videos or whatever, who knows, whatever it is you find online. And do you really want people to be getting their news from TikTok influencers? I don't think so. And to me anyway, the Online News Act is pretty simple if you think about it in terms of royalties for radio, like we're all used to, right? A song was played on the radio station broadcasts it, they pay a certain royalty for the use of that song. And for whatever reason, tech platforms have worked around that in some ways, and we've just kind of come to accept that. Whereas if you go back to that concept that if that tech platform, whether it's Facebook or Meta or Google or whomever, is benefiting directly from publishing and sharing news content, then they should be paying a portion for that content.
Well put. I want to ask you before we go. I want to get to your Portaging trip that I saw on Twitter. Always risky doing the this time of year. But before we do that, what are you optimistic about when it comes to the city of Hamilton?
We have so many opportunities in this city, and it feels like we're just turning the corner on where we want our city to go in the future. And I think now having a reversal of the urban boundary decision really gives us a firm vision for how we want the city to grow. And along with that, talking about the slate lands and all the employment opportunities, there's so much that's going on with the airport, employment, industrial lands as well. Opportunities for people in our city. So it is a really exciting time to be in Hamilton, and you kind of see Hamilton starting to become that regional center that we were in the past, and I think we have a fantastic opportunity to be once more.
How was the trip?
It was a great trip.
I think I read you had 1,000 pounds.
It was a lot
equipment.
of stuff.
Yeah, you had a lot of stuff. Where'd you go? How did it come about?
This is our annual canoe trip with my college buddies. So we were in Killarney for a few days. It rained for 2 days and 2 nights straight, so that wasn't so great. But it was definitely not a high intensity portaging trip. This is a base camp type.
Yeah, let's go to that other side of the lake there. No, it looked like a great time. I noticed there were some beverages being had, so that's always fun too. And I can appreciate college buddies getting together. So it looked like fun. And you made it back to be here on the show, so I appreciate that too.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Councillor JP Danko, thanks so much for doing this. My thanks to him for joining me, and my thanks to you as well. Make sure to like and subscribe to CHCH Podcast so you never miss an episode of this show or any of the other great shows for you, including a brand new episode of the Trending Now podcast that'll be dropping tomorrow. You can find CHCH Podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts or chch.com/podcast. My thanks to Mike Corsten for directing today's show. And once again, my thanks to you from all of us here at CHCH. I'm Louie Butko. Have a great day.